Hello everybody and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast today. Today Kanika and I are going to be talking about embracing your creativity. Now both Kanika and I work in creative fields and we'll get into that shortly, but first of all Kanika, how are you going this week?
Hi Jez, I'm good. I'm a bit tired because I've been quite busy being creative.
Oh.
And I can't say I'm having particularly long days. I am having long days, but I can't say that it's the long days that are making me tired, but I will say it is the excessive stretching of my creative brain muscle that is making me emotionally drained and physically drained. How has your week been, Jez?
My week has been good. I would say I'm the opposite. I'm feeling quite fulfilled creatively. I'm doing a lot of different things at the moment. And I think we should probably just break it down for people that are listening. So obviously both Kanika and I work at Magical Learning, but we also have some side projects. So for me, I do stand-up comedy. I do a bit of podcast producing. I do comedy writing for now some TV stuff, and I do some producing also for that. All fun, creative things. What do you do?
So I do comms for Magical Learning, but I also am a writer. I also teach creative writing. I edit, and I'm just in general a curator of like publications, at this point festivals, but yeah, art direction in some way.
So we both have a sort of different experience in terms of the actual creative work we do, but I think for both of us, there may be something similar in what we gain from it. You're obviously a bit overworked at the moment in terms of creative stuff, and I'm feeling like I'm at a great level. But what is it about creativity that you what do you like about creativity?
I mean, I don't know if there's something I like or dislike about it. It just feels like an inherent part of me. It feels like something I must do, you know? It feels like something that comes to me quite naturally and always has. So I haven't actually had to think about it a lot. I've always been someone with like an overactive imagination. And I just feel like obviously it had to come out in some way. And that's all creativity is to me.
Yeah, I think, I feel the same way, but I think it's also something that, even if you're not creatively inclined, it's something that you can definitely embrace, and I think that, when it comes to embracing creativity, I think that there's a couple things that people should keep in mind, especially if you've come from an area that you aren't normally creative. But I think that also more broad things than what we typically think of as creative can be creative. I think, for example, if you're a basketball coach, you can be very creative. There's different ways to be creative that doesn't have to be classically artistic.
Yeah. So inherently, like creativity doesn't only relate to an arts practice. Creativity is basically a way to approach something it's basically to like have a perspective on something that is your own original perspective, or to view something from a specific angle that hasn't been seen before, and it doesn't necessarily relate to any kind of artistic practice. It's just viewing something through your own unique perspective or lens. That's essentially, I think, what creativity.
Yeah. And so I also think that when it comes to embracing creativity, one tip that I would say is that you kind of have to be careful about how you judge yourself. Obviously, you'll never be as good as the masters as soon as you first start. Though we would all love to believe that we are. Everyone, I feel like when they start, are passionate.
Yeah, but my bad. Sorry.
But when you start a passion, like, I feel like you do feel like you want to be naturally incredibly talented, and wouldn't that be awesome? But I think it's really important to just consider that, you may start off really poorly, because it's really easy to be a critic. I think, that's really important to remember, is that it's extremely easy to be critical of anything. You can look at Everything Everywhere, the movie that won Best Picture last year, and if you wanted to sit through it and with a fine-tooth comb, you could have a lot of criticisms about that film, whether you liked it or not. So that's the easy part, is critiquing anyone. But having empathy and seeing what you did well, I think, is a really important step as well. What parts do I like about what I created?
Yeah, I think the perspective you're coming from, where this is concerned, it's not wrong, but I think it's like quite limited to an artistic practice, and it's quite limited to someone who is like, who wants to be like a writer, but they've been reading all the best writers. But I think in like the day to day, for someone who is not used to being creative, I don't think these are problems at the moment. Like for someone who's never done anything creative, or someone who's never like picked up a paintbrush, hasn't really like gone to a museum to look at a painting because they don't care about art. But I think my advice on embracing creativity is, I agree with what you're saying, but I feel like that applies to people with more of people who have an artistic practice. I think when it comes to maybe like just making time for yourself on a weekly basis, if you work in an office, to just like, I don't know, challenge yourself a little, like read a book. You would have read fiction instead of like a self-help book, watch a TV show you wouldn't otherwise watch. Open your mind a little bit, like stretch muscles in your brain that maybe make you a bit uncomfortable. Listen to perspectives that don't echo your beliefs back at you. There are different ways to, I guess, like embrace creativity in this sort of perspective. And I guess another thing to embrace creativity is like, just do it because you want to. Don't do it because you're like trying to like get any kind of external validation, or just do it if it feels good. And like try different things. If you try something and it doesn't feel good, move on to the next thing. If like you're someone who works like an office job, and you want to try and be creative, like start with a coloring book. And if you hate it, just be like, I'm never going to do this again. Like start journaling. There are these little day-to-day things that you can do. And I think another thing that I would say for creativity is, if you do really want to hone some kind of creative practice, is like immerse yourself in the thing that you want to do. Like Jez obviously like writes comedy, but he's watched so much comedy and is like listening to so many things that are comedic, or is always like finding like anything he watches. I've noticed the first thing he kind of takes from what he's watching is what parts of it were funny. I remember watching Breaking Bad with Jez, and I would have never laughed while watching that show. Okay, never. But I was watching it with him, and I've watched that show, I think when I was watching with Jez, it was the third or fourth time I was watching the show. And I'd never laughed once while watching it. But when I watched it with Jez, I was laughing because I was seeing what he was seeing, because I understood his perspective of it, even though it is a very intense show. But yeah, immerse yourself in the culture of what you want to embrace creatively. That's another tip.
Yeah, and I think also it's just like with all creative things, there's no... I also believe this at a really fundamental level, that there's no necessarily wrong way to do something. Like if you have just the goal of wanting to create something, there's no wrong way to do it. A lot of the times when I'm doing funny stuff or doing stand-up comedy, it'll be the thing that gets improvised on stage, or it'll be the idea that came to us while we're shooting that ends up being the funniest thing in the whole part of it. So you can go in with a lot of planning, but I think it's just about also being open to things may happen and embracing those, unique kind of elements that appear. Anyway, well, do you have any last things to say on embracing your creativity?
Yeah, just have fun. Just like get into something because it gives you joy. What I love about creative stuff is that you can synthesize emotions and experiences that you wouldn't have in your life otherwise, outside of this like thing you're consuming, whether it's staring at a painting for 3 hours or whatever. And yeah, so do that. Just like have fun with it.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for listening to this at-home episode of the Magical Learning Podcast. You can always follow us and find out more throughout our whole channel. We've got so many interviews that we've been doing, and we'll have some regular type episodes, the old school Magical Learning Podcast episodes where it's just the crew, coming up shortly as well. But otherwise, have a magical week.